There is a theory so unsettling that most academics refuse to take it seriously. Not because it's stupid, because if it's true, it changes everything. What if the people we call primitive, the ones we picture crouching in caves, grunting around fires, struggling to survive, what if they understood something about reality, about consciousness, about existence itself that we have completely and totally lost? Not lost like misplacing your keys, lost like a language no one speaks anymore. Lost like a song that existed for 10,000 years, and then one day, silence. What if we didn't evolve into wisdom? What if we evolved away from it? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not mysticism dressed up as philosophy. This is a question that archaeologists, neuroscientists, and anthropologists are beginning to ask in very quiet rooms, and the answers are making them uncomfortable. Let's go back, much further back than you're used to going. Roughly 70,000 years ago, something happened inside the human brain that scientists call the cognitive revolution. Language exploded. Art appeared. Humans started burying their dead with flowers, carving symbols into bone, painting animals on cave walls with a precision and emotional depth that still stops modern artists cold. We call this the Great Leap Forward, the birth of the modern mind. But here is the question nobody asks. What were we doing before that? Because here's what the fossil record quietly suggests. The human brain reached its current size not 70,000 years ago, not 100,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago. For 230,000 years, anatomically modern humans, people with brains identical in structure to yours, walked this earth and left almost no trace of symbolic thought. And then suddenly, as if a switch flipped, everything changed. What happened in that gap? What were 230,000 years of fully formed human minds doing in the silence? Some researchers believe they were thinking, deeply, quietly, in ways that left no physical record because they had no need to make one. Indigenous traditions across 6 continents describe the same thing, an ancient way of knowing that was not stored in objects or texts, but in the body, in breath, in direct experience of the present moment. They called it different things: the dream time, the Great Spirit, the Tao. The name doesn't matter. The experience they were pointing at might. And this is where it starts to get strange. Neuroscientists studying meditation have discovered something that should not be possible by our standard model of progress. When a monk with 40,000 hours of meditation practice sits in a brain scanner, the regions associated with self-referential thought, the mental noise we call the default mode network, the voice in your head that narrates your life, goes almost completely silent. What remains is awareness without content, presence without story, consciousness experiencing itself directly without the filter of language or ego or time. Researchers describe it as the most organized brain state ever recorded. Ancient traditions describe it as the natural state, the one we were born into, the one we forgot. But then, something strange happened around 10,000 years ago: agriculture. And with agriculture came something the human mind had never encountered before, something it was never built to handle: the future. When you plant a seed, you have to think about harvest time. When you store grain, you have to think about winter. When you build a civilization, you have to think about next year, next decade, next generation. And so the human mind, for the very first time in its 300,000-year history, learned to live somewhere else than now. It learned to live in tomorrow, and it never came back. The default mode network, that endless inner narrator, that machine that generates anxiety and regret and anticipation, researchers believe it grew stronger, louder, and more dominant precisely as civilization grew more complex. We traded presence for planning. We traded direct experience for abstraction. We traded knowing for knowing about. And we called it progress. But here is the part that will sit with you long after this video ends. Every ancient culture on Earth, without exception, has a myth about a golden age, a time before this one, a time when humans lived in harmony with nature, with each other, with something larger than themselves, a time when the veil between worlds was thin, when wisdom was not earned through study, but simply known. The Greeks called it the Age of Gold. The Hindus called it the Satya Yuga. The Norse described it as the time before Ragnarok. Indigenous Americans spoke of the world before the world. The ancient Egyptians pointed backward towards Zep Tepi, the first time when the gods walked among men. Every culture, every continent, the same memory. We always dismissed these as fairy tales, primitive people inventing comfort stories to make sense of a brutal world. But what if they were not inventing? What if they were remembering? There is a researcher named Julian Jaynes who proposed one of the most disturbing ideas in the history of psychology. In his book, published in 1976, he argued that as recently as 3,000 years ago, human beings did not have an interior monologue the way we do now. They did not have a private self narrating experience from inside their own heads. Instead, when they needed guidance, they heard voices, external, authoritative, divine voices that told them what to do. He called this the bicameral mind, two chambers, one that spoke, one that obeyed. And he argued that what ancient humans called the voice of God, the voice of the oracle, the voice of the ancestor spirit, was actually the right hemisphere of their own brain, communicating across to the left in a way that felt completely external, completely other, completely sacred. When the bicameral mind collapsed around 1200 BC during a period of catastrophic civilizational breakdown, humans were suddenly alone inside their own heads for the first time. The gods went silent. And in that silence, the modern self was born. Consciousness as we experience it, private, interior, narrative, may not be an ancient inheritance. It may be a very recent wound. And this is the part almost no one is willing to say out loud. We built our entire civilization, our science, our philosophy, our religion, our psychology, on a mind that has only existed for 3,000 years. A mind born from trauma, a mind born from disconnection. We have been trying to understand the human experience using the very tool whose birth was the problem. Think about that. The ancient peoples did not have therapy because they did not have the kind of isolated, narrative, self-referential suffering that therapy exists to treat. They did not have mindfulness apps because they had not yet lost the thing mindfulness is trying to recover. They did not carve the word peace on stone because peace was not something you pursued. It was something you had not yet learned to destroy. They were not waiting for us to arrive and save them. They were complete, and we looked at their completeness and called it ignorance. We looked at their silence and called it emptiness. We looked at their connection to the living world around them, to soil and season and stars, and called it superstition. And then we built a world so loud, so fast, so relentlessly stimulating that a human being cannot sit alone in a quiet room for 10 minutes without reaching for a screen. And we called that civilization. Here is what I think happened. I think we gained something extraordinary. Language, science, medicine, art, the ability to understand a universe billions of light years wide, the ability to reach across centuries with a single book. These are not small things. These are miracles. But I think in gaining them, we lost the ground we were standing on. We lost the quiet. We lost the directness. We lost the ability to simply be here without narrating it, without performing it, without turning it into content. We lost the thing that ancient humans had that made them look up at the night sky and feel not small, but connected, not afraid of the dark, but at home in it. The most advanced meditation practitioners in the world spend decades trying to return to a state that a hunter-gatherer may have lived in continuously. Sit with that. Maybe the question was never, how do we move forward? Maybe the question is, what did we leave behind? And is any of it still recoverable? Because somewhere in the oldest part of your nervous system, beneath the anxiety and the notifications and the noise, there is something that remembers. You can feel it sometimes. In the moment before sleep, in the silence after music ends, in the second you stand at the edge of the ocean and your thoughts, just for a moment, go quiet. That feeling is not nothing. That feeling might be everything. And the ancient humans, they may not have been behind us at all. They may have been standing exactly where we are still trying to get to.